Hey everyone, Brendan Center here. How are you? Thanks so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Whitesnake box set, Into the Light. This is a 6 CD box set. It is a beautiful thing. If you've been collecting any of the past Whitesnake boxes, then you kind of know what this is all about here. This one in particular, though, features David Coverdale's 3 solo albums turned into Whitesnake albums now. Just released on October 25th of 2024. So there's only a CD box set, but you can buy vinyl editions of these two plus the Into the Light album separately if you want. And so you can get those remixed ones for vinyl if you don't want the CD. We're going to get into all of that here in just a bit, break it down, do a full review and unboxing and everything. But if you are new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please do. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I greatly appreciate it. And if you turn on notifications, you're going to stay up to date on everything going on in the world of music, just like this, with a special review for the brand new Whitesnake box set, Into the Light. So I think the history here is pretty well known for David Coverdale having gotten his start in Deep Purple, and he only did a 3-year short stint in there from 73 to 76, but following the breakup of Deep Purple, David begins a very short-lived solo career, and he releases 2 solo albums. We get the one that is titled Whitesnake that came out in 77, followed by North Winds, which came out in 78. So you get those 2 things right away from him. And the thing is, though, following that, he forms Whitesnake, and that's really what David Coverdale is known for. But the 2 solo albums, from the people that played on it, and different things of that nature, it all led to the formation of Whitesnake, including the fact that Mickey Moody, who was part of Whitesnake from 78 to 83, plays on those first 2 solo albums. And the history of Whitesnake, too, is very well known. I mean, certainly their multi-platinum, huge success that they had in the 80s, especially in the US market, releasing the 3 studio albums that they did for the Geffen Records label, Slide It In 84, the self-titled 1987 album, also sometimes known as 87, and Slip of the Tongue in 1989. All mega sellers with mega hits and so forth. But of course, David Coverdale infamously breaks up Whitesnake at that point and then joins Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page for Coverdale Page, a fantastic 1993 album. But it wasn't too long before he returns to Whitesnake and releases this album, Restless Heart, 1997, which was actually supposed to be a solo album and was released as a solo album in a number of markets. The one that I just showed you there was the Japanese edition of it, where it was officially a Whitesnake album. But neither Coverdale Page nor Restless Heart are included in this box of, quote, solo albums, although those 2 probably could have been included in here, though we know by now that David Coverdale doesn't own the rights, or at least not the full rights, to the Coverdale Page material. And the Restless Heart album, this one here, has since been reissued already in its own box, which I think is probably why it's not included over here. But since it was also a Whitesnake album in some markets, I think he always saw it as a Whitesnake album, even though he did try to release it as a solo album as well. Anyway, that leads us to the 3rd and final solo album, Into the Light, from 2000, which is the basis of this box set. So this being the original copy of it. Now, in an effort to distance himself from Whitesnake at that time, he was really interested in getting his solo career going back on, even though he only done those 2 albums in 77 and 78. For this one here, he makes a conscious effort to do more of the bluesy rock style and less of that bombastic 80s stuff that he was known for. He also doesn't bring over any of the musicians from the Whitesnake camp, and he goes outside of that genre and stuff, band members from the 80s and things of that nature. And so the lineup for this is Earl Slick on guitar, who of course had worked with David Bowie and Ian Hunter of Mott the Hoople. Doug Bossy is on guitar. We got Marco Mendoza on bass from Thin Lizzy, Blue Murder, and a whole host of other bands. Denny Carmassi on drums from Montrose, Sammy Hagar, Heart, again, just to name a few for him. So certainly the band that is on the Into the Light album really had the caliber and the quality in order to make the music that they did, which in all could have easily been called Whitesnake at that time, but David Coverdale chose to do it under the solo, banner. And so now, 24 years on from the release, the original release of Into the Light, which was 2000, he has revisited, remixed, and remastered the album itself and retitled it as Whitesnake. Also, the same being done for those first two solo albums. So that's kind of the biggest thing here. That as part of this box, these solo albums are now actually considered Whitesnake albums, which is why he is releasing it under the Whitesnake banner, because that confused me initially when I heard the announcement for this. And you can even tell right off the bat with the vinyl releases. So the CD showing you the original David Coverdale at the top and the album name Whitesnake now just simply says Whitesnake on it, and it is now subtitled as 1977 so as to not be confused with the 1987 album. And North Winds, which didn't really have a distinctive Whitesnake logo but said David Coverdale and North Winds there, now says Whitesnake at the top and North Winds. So definitely rebrandishing these as Whitesnake albums, and in order to do so, that's where the revisited, remixed, remastering, all of that stuff comes into play. And what he doesn't really state on this, maybe that's the revisited aspect, is the embellishments that are part of this. And so let's go ahead and get into the box set itself and talk about these. First and foremost, 6 CDs are part of this. So this box set, like all the other ones that he has done, are the lift top style. It has all of the information on the back side and the spine. And just so you can see, here's the Restless Heart box that I just showed you. They're done the same way, the same size, everything. So for those of you like me that are collecting all of these, it is so nice that these can go on the shelf and all fit together. But here we go. We just lift the top right off this thing. And here's the hype sticker, which I know a lot of you guys like me. You keep those things to see what, all that stuff stipulates. And so here we go. We've got a book right on top, and we've got the lift top thing that just will pull that right out. So I'll show you the book in just a moment. We have a poster that is in here. Get that out. Okay. And what I wanted to get into right away with was showing you these. So that is the new cover to the Into the Light album. So there we go, the original with David Coverdale on the front of it. It's got his picture of his wife there on the back side. Nice, beautiful woman, as you would expect with a Whitesnake thing or anything associated with David Coverdale. But that's the new version of it. As we flip this thing over, we see that it's got 14 tracks on it. So it is expanded from the original release that is here. So Into the Light, first of all, I want to back up just a little bit on here, and then I'm going to further get into this, which is let's hit on the sound, right? Because most of you guys, that's what this is about. If something is revisited or, as I said, embellished, right, the first thing that's coming to our mind is how's the production, how's the sound on this? And so it's pretty much as you would expect from him. If you have taken part or picked up any of the 7 previously remixed releases that he did the Rock album, also known as the White album. We had the Love album, Red. This was followed up by the Blues album. So we got the Red, White, and Blues project. All the songs included on those were remixed, revisited, enhanced, which means other musicians coming in and embellishing parts, adding new guitar, new keyboard, layering stuff up, all that sort of stuff. He then does it to the Greatest Hits album, doing the same thing. I talked about the Restless Heart, so box set version of this, but also standalone release of that, fully embellished. He then does the Good to Be Bad album, now retitled as Still Good to Be Bad, and then he would do most recently the Purple album. And so Any of those right there, if you've listened to those and you've heard how the sound becomes much more punchy, it takes on much more of that 80s Whitesnake sound to it, the real sound that he's known for, even though a lot of you guys I know love that very early bluesy era of the band. He really puts it into that perspective, and that's what we have here. And in all, I think that all of the enhancements and things done are for the better on this, and I'll touch more on that later. But the Into the Light album. All right, so this is that, but the original one here, right? So it was recorded with early digital technology in 99, early 2000, which has become antiquated. And even the stuff that you would use to play that on or retrieve that information doesn't exist anymore. But luckily, David Coverdale had actually saved some of that equipment for just this instance here. And so they were able to access the files and do what they needed to, albeit they had to go through a bunch of hoops and things to properly get it restored, as he breaks down in the book. But that's how they were able to do it. North Winds. So for this one here, they were able to find the original master tapes on it, and they used a similar technology on it that was used in the Beatles documentary Get Back, and they were able to separate out each instrument and allow for a proper remix of that. And then the Whitesnake release itself, the master tapes of this one could not be located, and he used the best stereo mix that they could find, and in the case of this, they ended up using a different type of software called U-Mix, or they were something very similar to that, where they were able to break down each instrument. But the limitations in that were that things like the vocals could not be lead vocal could not be separated from the background vocal. So while they weren't able to separate some stuff out, they couldn't do as much as they wanted to with the vocals on it, because some of that stuff stayed sandwiched together in there, since they didn't have the original master tapes that they could break down. Now, that's how they were able to get to all of this stuff individually in order to remix it. What we have on each of these discs, starting with CD1, this being the 2024 remix version of it, hence the Whitesnake title and the new art and all that sort of stuff. The original album is included on here, minus the original intro that was called Into the Light. That's off of here. And I'm kind of glad, because I thought it was a strange way to open the album originally anyway. But they add 3 unreleased additional tracks to it with an alternate track listing from the original album, but no additional parts were added to it. So this album here is just remixed with no enhancements or embellishments to it. Although when you listen to it, you'll probably swear that there are additional enhancements or embellishments or things of that nature to it. But at least in terms of the book, it doesn't list anyone on there as having done any additional guitar, bass, keyboards, things like that that we get on the other 2 albums itself. Now, moving on to the second CD that's in here, looks like this, which takes from the single that was from the album, and you can see how it relates to the art from that. So it is nice that they carry some of that over onto this album. It gets broken down into 3 groupings here, but this is just referred to as Into the Light additional remixes and demos. There's 20 tracks total on here, 17 unreleased demo songs that didn't make the album, which is very cool to hear all those what if possibilities that could have been on the album itself. Plus there's 3 alternate versions of songs included as well. So along with this and this, you are getting very similar to other box sets where you get the album plus a bunch of bonus content on it. Then we move on to the North Winds and disc for CD3, 12 tracks on here. It's got the 2024 remix, which is the original album. You've also got those newly recorded parts that I was talking about, this being done by Alex Breckenridge. So he adds guitar, bass, keys. Tom Gordon adds additional percussion to it. And then tacked onto this, you've got 3 different versions of Time and Again. There is a strings version, a piano version, and then a strings only version on here. And just similar to the other ones, you get the CD in one of these plastic sleeves, and I'm going to touch a little bit more on that later because I've got some issues with that. CD4 in here is the Whitesnake album, now being a self-titled Whitesnake album from '77, so 2024 remix, featuring 17 tracks. You get the original 9-song album on here. But again, we get the embellished or newly recorded parts done by Alex Breckenridge and Tom Gordon. Now, what's cool is they tack on something on here called Young Lads Blues, which are 8 home demos from David Coverdale recorded back in 1968, a full 5 years before he would join Deep Purple. And we already got his original Deep Purple demo tape included on the Purple album, the remix package that he did here. So that's out there too if you want to hear those original demos that he submitted in order to get selected to become Deep Purple's frontman at that time in 1973. But his very first demos ever, 1968 home demos, are included on here, 8 of them, in fact, and they sound great. I thought they were going to be really, grainy and hiss and pop or just whatever, and no, they sound fantastic. And that was a really cool thing because he said for both of those, the ones that were the Deep Purple demo tape and these 68 demos were ones that he found when cleaning out things from his mom's house, and he found them in an old trunk and had no idea that his mom had saved these things. And so he thought this stuff had been lost forever. And in fact, he found all of this stuff simply because his mother, being so proud of him, had saved it. And I just thought that was a really, really killer story to have there. And how now we are finally getting it because his mom had saved it. So imagine if a mom, from Van Gogh or Picasso saved their child art from school, hung it on the refrigerator, right? And then all those years later, you could see what that, famous artist did early on. And that's what we're getting here. So very, very cool. All right. CD5 in here is the original Into the Light album using that same album art featuring the 14 tracks. So it is just remastered here, but it has the new running order that is different than the original. So even if you own, like me, the original here, first of all, this is the original mix of it, but it's got a different running order. It's also got that intro that isn't on this one. So it makes these two different in terms of a collector type people like myself. I appreciate that because if I'm going to have multiple versions of an album in my collection, I want to at least there to be some difference to it. At a minimum, different album art, but after that, hopefully there's something about it musically as well. All right, and the last disc, 6 in here, Whitesnake and Northwinds, grouped together their original albums remastered, but it has the same track listing and running order as the newer version of it. So there you go, with it saying the David Coverdale on the top. Northwinds is on the back, and I didn't like that aspect. I would have preferred these two to have been separate, but there you go, you do get that. So that's how you get the 6 albums in here. I sort of thought it would simply be the remix versus the remaster for all that way, but I was very pleasantly surprised to find an entire disc worth of bonus material included in here, and it wasn't just one for one in terms of those albums. So that was kind of cool. All right, so now I want to run through the book that's in here. We've got something called Into the Light, just as the same as the album cover. Some cool Whitesnake logo stuff at the front. And you get into this thing, and we start in with, an interview that's in here and some lead up into this stuff. So the thing is, there's not so much a history in here as an interview with David Coverdale. And this is sort of moving into what I call my questionable things about this box set. So we don't really get a full history. We get an interview with David Coverdale. And my issue with that is that it's more like David Coverdale couldn't be bothered with this. And that has to do with one of the lines that he says. You're getting this box set, and we want to know what was the embellishments, what was done to it. And the interviewer in here says, what kind of changes were made to the various songs and albums? And David Coverdale's response is, I'll leave that up to the listener. And it's just sort of like, wait a minute. On previous releases like the Red, White, and Blues project that he did, there were such great liner notes in here that talked about what was done to the tracks and things like that. And he seems to have fallen away from that, so I'm kind of bummed with that. I do like the book. There was a lot of cool, as you can see, pictures and things and different, territory release information and stuff like that. So a lot of killer stuff to look at in here. But I was kind of bummed about, the lack of information in terms of each album. Now, what is in here that I thought was very cool, and the stuff that I started to talk to you about were these 2 pages. There's really only 2 pages in here that I thought were killer, because that was where I got the information about how it is that they broke the stuff down, the technologies that were used. So they actually go in and do that. But if you can see, there's actually 4, categories or whatever that are listed here, 1 for each of the albums, 3. But then we have down here at the bottom, video and image restoration. And I'm surprised because there's no DVD or Blu-ray included in here. So why are they telling us about the video and image restoration process if you're not including in here any of the original music videos? And I don't know if he went on tour or anything for it at the time, but any live performances of this stuff, even if we gathered up live performances from later day versions of Whitesnake doing these songs, which there has been some of that stuff out there. So, yeah, that kind of baffled me. That's one of those questionable things about this box here. I talked to you briefly at the beginning about the plastic sleeves and said I'd have a little bit more to talk to you about. Now, if you can see, when I pull this out here, this perfectly aligns with this. Now, the reason it does that is I cut that down. This thing stuck up probably ½ an inch higher than this when I got it. And so it was jammed in there. These things didn't lay flat, and it really bugged me. And I've been noticing that a lot on past Whitesnake releases. I just don't like them. They're very cheap. They're not cut well. So that kind of bummed me. That was a questionable thing too, that I had to modify my own plastic sleeves just to make them slide in nice like that on here. So the other thing being something else I had already mentioned, just to touch on again, which is, if I can find the disc quick enough here, is the doubling up on 1 disc. These 2 albums, I really wish these had been standalone, mostly because they put song and track listing over the art that's there, and I don't like that. But if I'm going to listen to something, I want the full experience of just listening to that 1 album. I don't want to have to skip ahead. I don't want to have to flip something over, all that sort of stuff. So that was a little bit disappointing that they didn't just make this 7 CDs. In here, I'd have gladly paid a little bit more just to have had that. And then kind of the last thing in here is the overall packaging is fairly limited on this. In other box sets, the book has been broken down into the book itself with a history, an interview, and stuff like that, breakdown of each song. Then there would be photo booklets that are separate, lyric booklets. If there was a tour, they did tour booklets that were included in it, and we don't get any of that. All right, that's kind of fine in and of itself. The poster that's included in this, which is killer, by the way, is on some of the thinnest, most flimsy paper imaginable. And it's like, I don't even want to touch this thing. It's so thin. While it's a cool poster, it's just, oh my God, I can't imagine that it's certainly not high quality paper at all. And I don't know what's going on other than David Coverdale trying to save the cost of this from going up, because past boxes were around the $59 mark. This one here right now sitting on Amazon is $68. So you can see it's already up $10 from where previous box sets were. Perhaps if you had put a 7th disc or a Blu-ray and then higher quality papers and additional printed books and things, we might have been looking at a $100 box set. So I get it. I'm cool with it. I'm just pointing some of that stuff out so that we can all sort of understand perhaps where David Coverdale was coming from. But bottom line on this box set is that I think the changes are made for better. Continually, I really like the remixes on this. I think that they've enhanced truly the original albums, the original 1970s releases, which I didn't grow up with, but I always thought sounded very dated to me, sound modernized and not in a bad way. They now seem sort of like, you know, like they aren't from a particular era, so they're timeless, I guess is kind of the word I'm looking for. They sound like albums that don't live solely in the 70s and can have a life much longer beyond going forward. Into the Light always sounded a bit sort of mellow to me overall, and it's got a lot more punch to it. It still has more slower songs than, say, faster songs on it, but the way that they've been done now have a lot more punch. They're much more upfront. Everything just sounds better on it. Everything is much crisper on all of these. And so, all in all, again, if you've listened to past remixes that he's done, I think you're going to like this sort of stuff. And I think for the value that this box set is, even at the $68 price tag, I think it is still worth what you're getting for on here, especially with the fact that you've got 3 former solo albums turned into full-on Whitesnake albums, which for me is super, super cool. And since it looks like Whitesnake may be over at this point, David Coverdale hasn't been out touring in, I don't know, the last 4 years or so, and he's had sinus and medical issues, and so have other band members and stuff like that. This may be the only way we're getting new stuff going forward, and I'm glad to get something a little extra like this, at least to tide me over and to shine the light back on some of this classic or underrated material that could soon become classic, in my opinion, at least. And so there you go. That is the Whitesnake Into the Light box set review. But I did want to take just a moment to also, again, show you guys these LP versions, as they're not part of the box set itself. Very cool the way that they're done. We get the colored vinyl in here too, but we also get a standalone insert that has the interview and lyrics on it, where they separate out just the stuff, in this case for the Whitesnake album. But there you go, kind of a tan beige transparent one. And for the North Winds, there we go again, and the back side of this here, we get colored vinyl on this one as well. An insert that breaks out that interview and lyrics. And then the colored vinyl's beautiful purple, translucent. Doesn't really come through as well as I would like. It looks almost black. I don't know if I can, it's not, oh my goodness, sorry, it's not coming through, guys. It is a very dark purple, but it is translucent and it is not black, despite it showing that way. But anyways, yeah, I did want to give you guys, vinyl guys, at least a glimpse at those as well. And as a reminder, Into the Light is available on its own vinyl. I just didn't pick it up. Those 2 LPs came out 2+ weeks before the box set, and me being the fanatic I am, I had to go pick those up. If Into the Light had already been out, I would have picked it up too, but it wasn't. It didn't drop until the same day as the box set. But that's the cover of it. If you want to go hunt that down now, it is out as well. And so is this fantastic box set. Hope you guys enjoyed the review of this. Certainly let me know your thoughts on it. If you agree, if you think the enhancements and remixes and things actually do these albums justice and make them better, or if you prefer the original mixes. We all have our own tastes, right? Okay, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.